Persian language is a member of the Iranian branch of the Indo-European language family. It is the official language of Iran, and two varieties of Persian known as Dari and Taji are official languages in Afghanistan and Tajikistan, respectively. Persian throughout its history is divided into three periods: Old Persian, Middle Persian, New Persian. New Persian itself consists of Classical Persian and Modern Persian, the latter being what exists nowadays. Farsi is the endonym for Persian. Endonym means the word that the speakers of the language themselves use in their own language. But in English, when you say Farsi, you usually mean Iranian Persian. And then when you say Dari, you mean Afghan Persian. When you say Tajik, you mean Tajik Persian. So these are different varieties of Persian. The discussion I'm having today is limited to Iranian Persian. Modern Persian is a general term that refers perhaps to the written language only. When it comes to speaking, Persian in Iran has many regional dialects, like those spoken in such big cities as Shiraz, Isfahan to the south, or Mashhad to the northeast of Iran. In Persian, when you go to school or when you're taught Persian, you will be taught a variety of Persian which in academic studies might be referred to as written Persian. And then you would ask, okay, if that is written Persian, what is spoken Persian? Then you will find out that depending on where in Iran you are, people speak a different kind of spoken Persian, a different kind of dialect. Then the question becomes, all of these dialects, do they all equally count as spoken Persian? Obviously they do, but one of these varieties, Tehrani Persian or Tehran Persian, is in fact the prestigious variety of spoken Persian, or you could say the de facto standard spoken Persian. This raises a question: the variety that you learn at school, do you speak it or not? If you don't speak Persian as a native language, especially if you're not in Iran and you're trying to learn the Persian language, if you learn Persian from books and then speak it thinking that you know how to speak Persian, you would be speaking a variety which in Persian is called Bookish Persian or Farsi Kitabi. Is it okay if you speak Bookish Persian? If you speak Bookish Persian as a foreigner, you will sound cute, if not funny. Obviously, people will understand you, but that's not how people will speak back to you. To comprehend the situation of Persian, you need to know that in Iran, there is Bookish Persian, and then there is the vernacular Tehran Persian, or just Tehran Persian. And when you're speaking Persian, you would see that other people mostly speak what is not Bookish Persian. To clarify this further, I have a simple table here. On the left, I have Bookish Persian, and then in the middle, Tehran Persian. On the right, English gloss, English equivalent. For example, the word shane in Tehran Persian is pronounced shune, which means comb. It also means shoulder. Divune, which in Bookish Persian is divane, means crazy. For example, the word she'r is usually pronounced sher, and it means poem. You will learn from books that the word for raisin is keshmesh, but you will hear people pronouncing it as kishmish. These are some phonological differences between Bookish Persian and vernacular Tehran Persian. Another thing you need to know is that the difference is not limited to phonology. I'm going to give you an example of a sentence in Persian which has, you could say, grammatical differences. In Bookish Persian, you would say, Be madrese raftam, which means to school went I went to school. In VTP, or let's just say spoken Persian, you would say raftam madrese. 3 steps, went I school. In this case, what has happened, you have dropped the preposition and you have swapped the word order. As you can see, there's grammatical, syntactic differences between Bookish Persian and spoken Persian, and it's not limited only to phonology. For example, if you want to say his house or her house, you say khane ash, but in spoken Persian, you would say khunash. Here, you have a merger of vowels, and then you have a stress pattern difference. In the case of Persian, if you look at the Ferguson's diglossia and try to match the 9 criteria, you might find it to be the case that probably not all the 9 criteria apply to Persian, but still most of them apply. Depending on how strictly you want to define the word diglossia, you may say Persian is diglossic, or you may say it's not the case. But the important thing here is that whether you want to use the word diglossia or not, you have a situation in Persian in which 2 varieties are used side by side. One of them being Bookish Persian. What I call Bookish Persian is obviously used in writing, but it is also a formal way of speaking. So basically it becomes a style of speaking in Persian. There is different situations in which Bookish Persian is actually used as a way of speaking. Also, spoken Persian or Tehran Persian or vernacular Tehran Persian, which is the most prestigious spoken Persian probably. Again, this is one of the criteria in Ferguson's diglossia, which is that it doesn't have a well-developed orthography. Therefore, when it comes to writing, they tend to write it bookishly. I give you a simple example. Imagine a scenario in which husband and wife are having a conversation. They have run out of bread. The word for bread in Bookish Persian is naan, but almost always people pronounce it as noon. So wife says to husband, don't forget to buy noon. And the husband says, oh, let me write it down. When he puts it in writing, he's very likely to put it in writing as naan rather than noon. It's a very dynamic use of the language. Bookish Persian is indeed used in speaking for specific purposes, and the difference between Bookish and vernacular Persian is not limited to phonology. Anyways, that's it. Persian, Bookish Persian, vernacular Persian.